For the past week, I have been playing a lot of Elden Ring Nightreign, the latest game by FromSoftware. As a reminder on what this game even is, since it's not obvious from their trailers or marketing, it's essentially Elden Ring remixed into a fast-paced action roguelike for 3 players, where each run sees you fighting enemies and collecting loot in a shrinking Fortnite-esque circle. When the circle fully shrinks, you're forced into a nighttime boss fight, and if you survive, you repeat that same loop for day 2. After surviving the second night boss, you face off against a third and final boss, one of the 8 Night Lords, and win or lose, that'll mark the end of your run. I'm sure some of you are clicking on this video just to hear if I like the game or not. So to get that out of the way, yes, I do in fact like this game, and I had a lot of fun with the several dozen hours I put into it. The gameplay loop of Nightreign is surprisingly compelling, and there's a lot to appreciate about its design. If you feel like you share my tastes when it comes to Elden Ring, Soulslikes in general, action roguelikes, and co-op experiences, I recommend it. Unless of course you plan on playing it entirely solo offline, in which case I'd say no. This game is clearly designed with co-op in mind, and that experience is at its best when you're playing with friends. If playing with friends is here, playing with randoms via matchmaking is here, and playing entirely solo is here. But yeah, it's a great time with the group. All that being said, I do have problems with Nightreign, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a fair bit that left me disappointed. I'll get into exactly what those problems are later, but a lot of it boils down to a lack of randomization and variety across the board. 2 things you usually want to nail in a roguelike. I don't know exactly how other people are reviewing this game, but let's just say it's not the next 10 out of 10 FromSoft hit. And that's okay. It's a $40 experimental spin-off game relying on recycled content from Elden Ring and coming from a first-time director. And while I'm absolutely a fan of Miyazaki handing the reins over to someone else to do something experimental and weird, that comes with obvious limitations. And that's all from a charitable perspective. I know plenty of people who are far less interested that hate everything this game stands for, and their interest drops to zero when they hear words like fast-paced, multiplayer, and Fortnite-esque. That's not what they play FromSoft games for. And honestly, fair enough. I get it. If you fall into that category, this game definitely isn't for you. If you watched my last Nightreign video covering the preview event, most of my thoughts and predictions for this game have remained the same. The stuff I liked, I still like. And the stuff I was mixed on, I'm still mixed on. Anyway, yeah, Nightreign is fun. So let's talk about what it actually is, what works, what doesn't, and everything in between. First, let's go over the full gameplay loop to make sure we're all on the same page. Before a run even begins, you'll find yourself in an alternate version of the round table hold. If you step up to the table itself, you'll be able to select which Night Lord you'd like to hunt in a vaguely similar fashion to selecting a monster to hunt in Monster Hunter. From there, you'll get thrown into matchmaking to find 2 other players. But of course, you also have the option of playing with friends by using a password. Or, I can't believe this since it's a FromSoft game, you can invite people to a lobby to skip the password altogether. It would have been cool if they actually got invited to the hub itself and you could interact with each other, but oh well. I'll take it. Next, you'll be presented with the character select screen, where you can choose between 8 different Nightfarers. I'll go over some of them a little more later, but the important thing for now is just knowing that each offers a pretty distinct playstyle with their own passive ability, active ability on a short cooldown, and ultimate ability on a longer cooldown. Trust me when I say that this character roster is the best part of the game and goes a long way toward remixing the rhythm of the Elden Ring combat experience while also providing opportunities for fun co-op synergies and interactivity. You have a dude with a grappling hook, a birdman that can dive bomb the ground, a terraforming muscle guy that likes to headbutt enemies, a Sekiro parry master that can transform into a primordial beast with a whole separate moveset, and even a spirit summon class that summons a giant skeleton that shoots laser beams. And that's all on top of the unique moveset each character gets when using their preferred weapons. Like, using a greatsword with Wilder is different than using a greatsword with any other character. So yeah, this is Elden Ring combat, but these additions make Nightreign's combat very much its own thing. And side note, since you'll see them throughout the video, yes, there are skins you unlock for each character with in-game currency collected from completing runs, and those skins include quite a few Dark Souls references. After each player selects their character, you'll be shown a brief cutscene of everyone walking toward a cliff before breaking into a sprint to catch a ride from a spectral hawk. Then the game finally begins with you gliding onto the map on your bird. Instead of picking where you're dropping tilted tower style, the game picks for you. Pretty much every time, you'll land right next to a small camp filled with weak enemies that provide just enough runes to get to level 2. Just like Elden Ring, you need to find a site of grace to level up. But instead of choosing your stats, you simply hit the level up button to get a stat boost across the board depending on the character you're playing as. I originally speculated that getting to choose your stats would be a better leveling system, but no, just a simple level up is a much better fit for such a fast-paced game. Speaking of which, let's talk more about that fast pace. Nightreign operates at a near breakneck speed where you don't really ever want to stop moving. Your primary means of getting from point A to point B is your super sprint, which is about twice as fast as just running normally. The reason you need to move so fast is because there's a constant ticking clock and shrinking play area that will rapidly damage you if you're outside of it. And your ability to effectively clear obstacles and choose your route through the map directly correlates with how strong you'll be able to get before facing the night bosses. When you first start out, you'll probably be like level 4 or 5 by the time you reach the first night. But once you get better and figure out what works, it's not unreasonable to reach level 10 by that same point in the match. Now, I'm sure some people will hate the fast-paced nature of this game, especially if they're coming from Elden Ring and we're hoping for a more slow-paced and exploration-driven experience like they're used to. But I really do think that the speed of this game works and is necessary for the type of game they're trying to make. Without this sort of time limit, not only would match length balloon into something unreasonable, it would also remove the strategy of moving around the map and defeating bosses in a timely fashion. When you and your buddies roll up on a boss, it might be a foregone conclusion that you'll win the fight, but what's undecided is how long it'll take. And taking 1 minute versus 2 could be the difference in allowing you to hit up one more point of interest before nightfall. Thus, your goal isn't just to win each fight, but to win each fight quickly. The shrinking zone format also creates these tense and fun moments where you might get greedy trying to finish off a boss as the zone rapidly approaches, or you might find yourself struggling to scramble up a cliff as you barely outrun the flaming death barrier. These moments kind of rule, and all of that would be lost if FromSoft hadn't opted for such a fast-paced game. But what are you actually doing while you're speeding around? Basically, you're clearing a variety of points of interest, such as camps, forts, churches, and castles. In addition to the runes they provide for leveling, each one features at least one mini-boss encounter that drops a floating colored soul as a reward for defeating it. And this soul gives you the choice between 2 or 3 different rewards, ranging from new weapons to minor permanent passive buffs. These permanent buffs include stuff like plus 10% extra healing, or plus 6% physical damage. These points of interest also have additional loot in the form of extra weapons and consumables that pop out of chests. Each weapon has a passive attached to it, such as extra damage when two-handing, or faster spellcasting. But these passives still take effect even when the weapon isn't actively being held. That means you should fill up all 6 equipment slots with weapons even if you only plan on actually using one to attack. Just like the other buffs, these are typically just minor stat boosts. However, a handful of weapons have special passives that only apply when you're holding them, and this is indicated by a small hand icon. Due to this restriction, they tend to be more impactful. Like one time I got a weapon that created lava whenever I began to sprint. Also, weapons have 4 different rarity levels: white, blue, purple, and orange. As you'd expect, they get more powerful the higher up you go, and each has its own level requirement. Level 3 for blue, level 7 for purple, and level 10 for orange. Lastly, all loot can be shared, and this provides an opportunity for teamwork if you trade items with your teammates. For example, since boss soul rewards are individual, you might get the chance to choose a high tier staff or bow that wouldn't fit your melee character, but would be perfect for your teammate. However, this is a bit tricky to pull off in random matchmaking due to the speed of the game and lack of communication, so I found myself mostly just doing this while playing with friends. As a side note, the randomized nature of which weapons you get is awesome for a game using Elden Ring as its base. I mentioned it in the previous video, but it bears repeating that Elden Ring is a game with hundreds of weapons and hundreds of spells in which the average player probably only used a very small fraction of that total amount. And Nightreign presents the perfect opportunity of forcing you to play around with weapons, skills, and spells you likely never touched in Elden Ring. While you're running around, you'll also be encountering other points of interest. The most important one is easily the ruined churches that add an extra maximum charge to your healing flask. Most runs will have you routing between every single one of these, since they're some of the most impactful upgrades you can acquire. There are also Everjails that can be unlocked with stone sword keys that contain mini-bosses, merchants that sell a variety of consumables and weapons, and mage towers that contain mini puzzles for you to solve to unlock various magic rewards. And as you're moving between all these points of interest, the super sprint isn't your only option. You can also keep an eye out for spirit streams and spectral hawk trees to reach your destination more efficiently. Spirit streams function more or less identically to spirit springs from Elden Ring by allowing you to leap up high into the air, and spectral hawk trees allow you to hitch a ride on, you guessed it, a spectral hawk. These hawks follow set paths indicated by lines on the map, but you can deviate from the path slightly by tilting the left stick or hopping off early. And, as I'm sure you've seen by now, you have a little wall climb you can do. And then in between all of that, there's still more in the form of scarabs that drop talismans, packs of roaming enemies, and additional field bosses hang out on their own. I really want to hand it to FromSoft for not only filling up the map with things to find, but also making the act of moving from point A to point B interesting through the varied terrain and elevations paired with these platforming mechanics. And because of the open world format, they needed to make approaching each point of interest at least somewhat interesting from every angle. And I think they mostly succeeded. Like the castle in the center of the map. Regardless of if you approach it from the north, east, south, or west, it works and is engaging on some level. Anyway, as you're running around, collecting stuff, and killing enemies, there's a good chance you might go down. But instead of dying immediately, you have the chance to be brought back by this game's best feature, attacking to revive teammates. While it looks silly, it's actually pretty fun because there's a bit of strategy in how you hit them. Like, maybe you just run in to whack them, maybe you pull out a bow and shoot them from a distance, or best of all, maybe you utilize a big ultimate attack that not only revives your teammate, but also deals massive damage to the boss. It's quality stuff, and ultimately the exact type of thing I'm looking for when playing a co-op game, that being co-op interactivity. And you can't get much more interactive than shoving a sword up your friend's ass to revive them. It's also worth noting that as you repeatedly go down, the amount of damage you need to receive to be revived also goes up. So don't expect to get away with being too careless, as it can be quite the ordeal to get revived when all 3 bars are full. And on the topic of co-op interactivity, Let's talk a bit more about the various character abilities. You have great stuff like Raider's Ultimate that shoots a giant stone pillar out of the ground, but that pillar remains as part of the environment for a time, and you can do stuff like have your teammates sit on top and pelt the boss with ranged attacks. You have Iron Eye's marking ability, where he dashes in to mark a target, and then marked targets take increased damage from everyone in the group. You have the Duchess's restage ability that allows her to repeat the damage an enemy just received, so you're encouraged to pay attention to what your teammates are doing and potentially combo big attacks with them. You have the Recluse and her magic cocktail ability, where you can create unique spells by pulling elements off not only enemies, but your teammates as well. What I just listed is far from an exhaustive list of co-op interactions, but do you get the idea? And even when abilities interact in less direct ways, there's still always that element of potential teamwork that permeates the whole combat system. Again, this is all great, and it goes a long way toward facilitating an interesting co-op experience. Eventually, at about the 11-minute mark of the run, you'll be hit with the message of "Rains gather, portending the tide of night," and that's when the circle starts to rapidly shrink. At this point, you can push your luck a bit by trying to sneak in a couple more mini-boss kills, but your main objective should be working your way toward the floating golden tree in the sky, since you only have about 2 minutes until the zone fully shrinks. Once there, you'll face off against a wave of small enemies, and after defeating them, the night boss will appear from a purple mist. These night bosses are really neat. Most of them are designed with co-op in mind, and that can take a few different forms, such as multiple enemies at once, like a draconic tree sentinel with 2 horseback riders assisting him. It can also take the form of Elden Ring bosses with new attack patterns designed for group play, such as Margit with his new super blood slashes and more aggressive throwing dagger moves. On top of that, a handful of old Dark Souls bosses make an appearance, like the Centipede Demon, and this too is a cool fit for co-op because you can cut off its limbs and they'll keep attacking you while detached. All of this helps create an environment that encourages teamwork, and I frequently found myself communicating with my friends with callouts like, "Hey, you hold aggro on that guy while we focus down these guys." It's fun. The new boss mechanics were exciting to see though, and I basically just wish there was a little more since not every boss feels new. Like, hey, it's awesome that the Falling Star Beast can now create these giant stone platforms that you can make it crash into. Give me more of that. After defeating the night boss, everyone gets to choose a major boss reward, and this comes in the form of a passive buff, but a more impactful one than most of the daytime boss rewards. I originally expressed some hesitation around this passive buff concept in my previous video, and unfortunately, I feel pretty much the same. The vast majority of these buffs are just kind of boring. Like, hey, plus 18% damage negation is nothing to sneeze at, but man, that's just not very interesting from the perspective of changing your playstyle or evolving the build of your character mid-run. To be fair, there are a few interesting upgrades, like the one that creates an ice storm when you start sprinting, or the one that generates lightning bolts when you dodge, or the ones that cast spells when you slowly walk. But that's pretty much it, and they're a lot less common, and typically less useful, than the straight stat upgrades. I also ran into a frequent occurrence where 1 or 2 of the 3 upgrade choices would just be totally irrelevant to my character. Like, yeah, I'm probably not going to pick the option that boosts my spellcasting as the strength melee guy. This isn't inherently a bad thing, but it makes the already limited pool of upgrades feel more limited. And when 2 of the upgrades don't apply to your character, you're not really making a choice by defaulting to the 3rd. All that being said, I do want to extend some sympathy to what FromSoft created here and what their vision for Nightreign was. Ultimately, I think FromSoft wanted to create a condensed Elden Ring experience, but if they got too wild or too interesting with the upgrades, it could quickly devolve into something that isn't Elden Ring anymore. Is that goal potentially at odds with a genre that demands you repeat the same thing over and over? Maybe, but I do understand the dilemma of wanting the upgrades to be mostly background stat boosts in order to leave the core combat intact. And again, you're still getting build variety in the form of the weapons you collect, so it's not like that aspect of the game is entirely absent. I still land on the side that I wish things were handled a bit differently when it came to choosing upgrades, but yeah, I get why it ended up this way, and I think they did a solid job within that restricted vision. Anyway, with the night 1 boss down, day 2 begins, and the gameplay loop repeats. So let's go over some more things that can happen during that loop of running, fighting, and looting. One of the most interesting things that can happen while roaming around are these random events that demand your immediate attention. One example of this is a huge pack of enemies quite literally falling out of the sky. Another example would be Margit invading and then hunting you down. Both of these are interesting because they can happen at any point during the run, even at inconvenient times, like while you're fighting another boss. This forces you and your group to improvise, and I think roguelikes are typically at their best when you're forced to improvise by making the best of a bad situation. These also have the opportunity to create dynamic moments that are dependent on the environment of the map itself. One great example of this was when I was playing with Zully in Illusory Wall during the network test, and Margit invaded us while we were looting the small interior room of a fort. He wound up getting stuck inside, and we were able to pelt him with ranged spellcasting. It might sound like I'm being sarcastic when I say this, but this was awesome. And although it's a bit of a silly example, it shows just how much potential there is for the system to mix things up depending on where and when these events happen. Another random event that I really enjoyed was when we got cursed and lost some of our maxed HP. We originally had a route planned, but we were forced to drop everything and find the guy who cursed us, which happened to be across the map. When we found him, he demanded 35,000 runes to lift the curse. We didn't have the money, so I said, fuck it, let's blast him, and what do you know? we triggered a secret boss fight. This is Nightreign at its best. Memorable encounters that mix things up, force you to improvise, and encourage you to deviate from your typical route. My complaints about this random event feature are just that I wish it was more frequent, and I wish there were more types of events. I want to say I only got to see one of these every 4 or 5 runs, and the pool of encounter types is a bit too small if I'm already seeing plenty of repeats with that level of infrequency. Another world event that you can sometimes run into is an interdimensional vortex, which, while neat, isn't quite as cool as the name suggests. It's a tornado that sometimes appears hovering above a key location at the start of a run rather than appearing mid-run at random, and they function by buffing the enemies and bosses below. Additionally, entering these areas prompts 2 NPC invaders to pop up and attack you as well. So again, neat idea that breaks up the usual routine of a typical run, and I would have loved to see more of this type of thing. The biggest deviation that can change a run though is a shifting earth event. However, similar to the vortexes, instead of surprising the player mid-run, these are telegraphed ahead of time at the very start. Basically, you'll sometimes encounter a different version of the map, where one of the quadrants has been terraformed and remixed into a different environment. There are 4 in total, and they include a volcano zone, snowy mountain zone, scarlet rot swamp zone, and Noxtella city zone. So again, to be clear, 80% of the map is the same as usual, but part of the map is now this additional biome. Each of these is big and dense enough that in order to explore and complete them properly, you need to dedicate most of your day 2 time solely to the shifting earth location. Tackling them day 1 is usually completely off the table, since these areas are tough and filled with plenty of higher level mini-bosses. They each function kind of like legacy dungeons, and the first one, the volcano, is a great example of this. You essentially need to descend down the volcano layer by layer while dealing with various bosses along the way. If you make it to the end, you get a very worthwhile reward. I won't spoil what the rewards are, but each shifting earth has its own reward, and they're massive enough that you pretty much want to go after them every run if they're on your map. When you get a shifting earth event, it will remain on the map for several runs in a row, even if you reach the reward at the end. And as you go through the game for the first time, you'll encounter each of the 4 shifting earth events sequentially. I have some problems with how they decided to implement this whole system, especially within the context of them becoming incredibly infrequent after the credits roll, but overall, I think this is a very cool addition, and the shifting earth biomes are incredibly fun to figure out the first time you encounter each one. So yeah, that's basically how a run goes. You run around getting stronger for 2 days and defeat a variety of bosses along the way. If you manage to do that, all that's left is the final boss at the end, the Night Lord. As I mentioned earlier, there are 8 Night Lords in the game, and I think basically all of them are great fights. And more so than the Night 1 and Night 2 boss fights, the Night Lords feel designed from the ground up for co-op. The obvious example is the first Night Lord, Gladius the 3-headed dog. He not only has tons of sweeping attacks that can hit the entire group, he also splits into 3 separate dogs at multiple points during the fight. Dealing with 3 things at once feels pretty co-op to me. But what really won me over with these bosses is the design philosophy of mixing gimmicks into the fight alongside traditional attack and dodge gameplay. There are multiple moments where it feels like you're fighting an MMO raid boss, and I mean that in the best possible way. Libra is a great example. This guy will light your screen up with projectiles and shockwave attacks designed to target everyone at once. Not only that, but there are additional mechanics like needing to collect little madness pebbles off the ground while fighting to keep your madness meter down. There's even a part where he goes into a meditative stance, and you need to quickly break all the floating sigils he creates in a limited amount of time. And some of these are high enough off the ground that you need a ranged weapon to hit them. If you're too slow, he gets temporarily buffed and goes into a whole different attack pattern. As someone who often misses when FromSoft used to be more experimental with puzzles and weird gimmicks during boss fights, I think this blending of traditional fast-paced Elden Ring action with strategic co-op focused gimmicks is fantastic. Seriously, these won me over in a big way. Another cool aspect to these fights is that team composition matters. Like, obviously any fight can be done with any group of characters, but sometimes it can be massively helpful to have a ranged character to target the boss while it's flying, or a tanky character in charge of trying to hold aggro. Stuff like that. This is an element of the FromSoft co-op experience that's new and refreshing. And that's to say nothing of the spectacle of it all. Like, oh my god, these guys look really cool. And the music! Just listen to this shit. It's wonderful, and pairs with the different vibes of the bosses so well. Win or lose here, you'll exit the run with rewards in the form of relics and merc. Relics can be equipped in between runs to slightly alter your stats and abilities, and merc can be used to purchase additional relics or cosmetic skins for your characters. This is a good time to talk about the roundtable hold and what else there is to Nightreign beyond going on runs. First of all, this version of the roundtable hold is fucking gorgeous. You have trees growing out of crumbling walls, rays of sunlight peeking through holes in the roof, and multiple outdoor areas seamlessly mixed in with the interior zones. It's beautifully done, and I don't think I'm crazy for saying this is one of the coolest hubs FromSoft has ever created, which is pretty surprising given that the original roundtable hold was like in the bottom 3 for me in terms of FromSoft hubs. The hub has multiple functions, like a codex to read over all the mechanics and character details, a training area to mess around with each of the Nightfarers, and a little jar guy that sells you stuff. The most important function it has, though, is the ability to access character remembrances. As you play with each character, you'll unlock chapters in a journal that provide bits of story about the character, and some of these chapters have the option to begin remembrance. After selecting this option, you'll essentially get taken back in time to a specific story moment prior to the events of the game. And while there, you can talk with various NPCs for some classic FromSoft NPC dialogue and storytelling. Most of these vignettes conclude with an NPC requesting something for you to do while on your next run. These typically include collecting an item or defeating a specific enemy. Then after you do that, you unlock another story beat, a collectible item usually in the form of an equipable relic, and then the next chapter of the journal begins. Each of the 8 Nightfarers has their own little story with their own objectives. Aside from collecting relics, this is the main form of meta progression to focus on while playing. And they're definitely worth doing even if you don't care about the story, because the relics you unlock are always the best and most powerful ones for each character. One major downside to this whole system is that multiple remembrance objectives can't be active at the same time while in a party. So if you're playing in a group of 3 and all 3 of you are trying to progress remembrance by collecting something, only the host will be able to earn progress. I understand why they had to do it this way, but it's ultimately an awkward choice in a multiplayer focused game. On that note, let's talk a bit more about my actual experience with this game. So obviously I received a review code, but since this is a multiplayer game, Bandai tried to facilitate that experience by creating a private Discord server for other content creators and games journalists to connect on. Several of my content creator friends were included in that group. So due to this setup, I not only got to experience the game with a pre-made group of friends, I also sometimes queued up with random people of various skill levels via the random matchmaking. I also went out of my way to occasionally play the game entirely solo to understand that perspective as well. Let's talk about playing with friends first. Like most co-op games, this is the most fun way to experience the game. You're not only able to communicate effectively on where exactly you want to go, you can also better utilize mid-boss strats of pulling aggro and comboing abilities. Additionally, it's far easier to share weapons and items with each other. For example, right before each Nightlord fight, there's a shop that sells 2 Starlight Shards to restore FP. If you're a spellcaster, these are valuable. So if you're in a group, your friends can also buy 2 each and drop them for you, giving you a total of 6 items for FP recovery. You also have the opportunity to organize goofy runs where everyone plays the same character. I highly recommend messing around with this. You'd think 3 Iron Eyes wouldn't work, but it actually works a little too well, and my triple Revenant run with our army of spirit summons was especially memorable. And of course, the biggest reason to play with friends is just because it's fun to hear each other's reactions when things get dire and someone clutches it out. And this game provides plenty of opportunities for clutch moments due to the revive mechanic. You guys gotta do it, bro. You just gotta do it. You just gotta do it, bro. You just gotta do it. Come on, you can do it. 1 or 2. It's 1 or 2. 1 or 2. No. 1 more hit. Yes!
Dude, oh my god.
Oh my god!
That was
Are you recording
crazy.
that? Are you recording that?
I recorded that. I recorded that.
Oh my god!
Next, playing with randoms via matchmaking. This is still a very fun way to play the game, but it definitely has the potential to be a more frustrating experience. When you're running around the map, there's nothing stopping your teammate from just ignoring you and wandering off on their own. I ran into this issue multiple times, even within this private pre-release context, so I can imagine it getting even worse when the game fully releases. There is a pinging system where you can mark points on the map, and that does help out a fair bit, but you still might get ignored. As a result of not being able to communicate properly, you're simply going to be less efficient in fighting and looting, and that translates directly to being less powerful for each boss fight since you'll be wasting time. Runs also tend to be a bit more chaotic when you're forced to go along with teammates making strange routing decisions. Thus, the game is harder, and honestly, that's not necessarily a bad thing, since I think a good challenge is fun. Hell, one time I had a terrible run going where one of my teammates was only level 8 for the final boss, but we managed to do it, and you better believe that was an exciting fight. So yeah, still a very fun way to experience the game, but I definitely prefer the friend experience, and I suspect those who play with friends will enjoy the game more in general. Lastly, we have offline solo play. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, I do not recommend you play the game like this. But that doesn't mean it's not doable, and that doesn't mean there isn't fun to be had. Enemies and bosses' HP bars are scaled down appropriately, though there's a good chance you're still going to struggle because you'll still be dealing with encounters that had co-op in mind, like boss fights with groups of enemies. FromSoft still does their best to provide you with a few tools to succeed though, such as a guaranteed purchasable item from merchants that will let you revive once per run. This is only in shops when you're playing solo. I did find some success playing solo, and I have beaten the majority of Nightlord bosses this way, but it's tough and borders on challenge run territory, something I think the average player would find too punishing and unfun. If you do insist on playing this way, I highly encourage you to at least learn all the bosses in a co-op setting first. But yeah, overall, I had fun with all 3 of these different ways of playing. It took me about 15 hours to hit the credits for the first time, but I think that's on the faster side, and I suspect the average player will take somewhere around 25 hours, if not longer. Now I've been sprinkling my thoughts and critiques throughout this whole video, but let's spend some time to really get down to what I see as the bigger problems and disappointments I have with this game. First, and this is the biggest one by far, randomization and variety across the board is lacking. This takes a few different forms, but the main one is the map itself. Basically, with the exception of the shifting Earth world events, there is one map for the entire game. The only thing that changes between runs is that most of the points of interest get swapped around with each other. Like, what was a fort one match might be a church the next one. Other points of interest like spirit streams, spectral trees, scarabs, everjails, and the central castle don't ever swap around. And of course, the terrain itself remains the same. Now, none of this is inherently a bad thing, but it does lead to runs feeling pretty similar each time, especially if you're like me and figure out strats like how it's effective to always set up the castle as soon as possible. This is compounded by the points of interest themselves being incredibly static. Like if you get a fort, there are exactly 2 potential bosses, a golem or a Crystallian, that you can encounter here, each with corresponding enemy layouts. Some areas are even worse. Like if you get the Sleep Ruins area, you will encounter the same rune bear every time, no matter what. What this means is that after you encounter an area for the first time, you pretty much know exactly what to expect the next time you see it. Their locations on the map might shift slightly, but the areas themselves are incredibly static. This extends to the shifting Earth biomes as well. So yes, they do change up the map, but these areas are also very static. Same locations, same enemies, same bosses, same rewards even, every time. That's why I said they're very fun to figure out at first, but less so as you keep encountering them and basically know exactly what to do. Now, I'm of two minds about this. On one hand, as I've said, yes, this all feels a little too predictable for a roguelike. On the other hand, this does play into classic FromSoft level design of being very deliberate with enemy and boss placements. So while sure I would have liked more, what we're left with is still thoughtful even if it is static. And on top of that, because you know exactly what to expect, it means you can both refine your strategies for specific areas, while also being able to better gauge how long a specific area will take to clear based on past runs. Regardless, runs do feel too similar too quickly, and I found myself slipping into patterns of doing the same thing each run and taking similar routes even when the starting locations were different. Not only does this get samey, it also makes the game easier and easier because you figure out what works, and you can just keep repeating that. Like I said, I was reaching level 10 by the first night pretty often at a certain point, and that's a consequence of this design. I think in my ideal version of this game, there would be a separate map for each Night Lord rather than one map for all 8. I really think they could have gotten a bit crazier than making everything Limgrave. Sure, we have a shifting Earth event that turns one corner of the map into a swamp, but I feel like this game would have benefited more from a map where the whole thing is a swamp, or a volcano, or a snowy mountain. I recognize that's asking for a lot though, so that might just not have been realistic given the scope of the game. Side note, it is wild how infrequent shifting Earth events are after you complete the game. I think I got only one after hours and hours of runs, so that feels off to me, especially when it's one of the few things that adds some meaningful variety to the game. Maybe I was just unlucky though. My issues with limited randomization and variety also extend to the upgrades you can acquire mid-run, but since I already said most of what I wanted to say earlier in the video on this topic, I'll just remind you that it's a thing and further compounds the lack of variety I just mentioned with the map. To be clear, I think the game does deliver a very solid experience that maintains that FromSoft quality we're used to, and if you're just aiming to hit credits, it doesn't outsay its welcome. It's mostly after that point, when you try to keep playing it as this replayable roguelike, that you'll probably notice these things too, especially since there's no extra modes or harder difficulty options to uncover after finishing the game. I really hope they add some sort of hard mode, or maybe even a chaos mode that drastically increases the boss pools of each location, like maybe you can find a rune bear or a dragon on top of a fort instead of a knight. The Night Lord elemental weakness system is also kind of strange to me. So basically, cool idea on paper. You get to see the elemental weakness of each Night Lord before selecting it at the round table hold. If you use a weapon with the corresponding element, not only do you deal a lot more damage, you also get extra elemental staggers with their own unique animation. Keep in mind, these elemental staggers are in addition to the normal staggers. Between that and the extra damage, you can absolutely steamroll the Night Lords if everyone has the relevant damage type. Like truly, victory is a foregone conclusion if you do this. But hey, that seems like a fair reward for getting lucky with the weapon drops, right? Well, maybe, but my issue is that you can actually get them basically every time. You see, ruins and camps on the map are often marked with a corresponding elemental icon. This tells you what type of elemental threat you'll be dealing with, but it also tells you the type of reward you'll get. That means if you go to a fire camp, you're guaranteed to get a fire weapon. And even though it might only be blue tier rarity, all you need to do is run over to one of the unchanging mine locations and defeat a very easy mini boss to get a smithing stone that allows you to upgrade it to purple tier. A purple weapon with the correct element is more powerful than a legendary orange weapon. And again, with how this system is set up, you can get one of these pretty much every run with very little effort. Now, on some level, I like the idea of planning ahead and being strategic with your weapon choices to counter a boss, but the numbers here feel off. And maybe I'd be more okay with this if there was some form of harder difficulty options or alternate modes to mess around with after beating the game, but like I already mentioned, there are none. And I'm left with this feeling of, do I use this strategy to guarantee the win, or purposefully sandbag myself to have more fun? Truthfully, I'm faced with similar dilemmas in other FromSoft games, but it definitely doesn't feel great here in a game that revolves entirely around combat, at least for me. Next,